Hey everybody, welcome to the Pop Culture SquadCast. How are you?
I'm doing swell, Bob. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad you're back. I know we missed you on Tuesday. We had a great show then, but this is the second show this week. We have a great guest on tonight. Shelly Bond is making her first official Pop Culture SquadCast live appearance, which is surprising since we're on episode 70 here and it's her first time in. She's a good friend of Pop Culture Squad, and we'll get her in soon. We have a couple of things we want to talk about before then, but in the meantime, are you staying warm up there? Because it's cold.
It was about 35, 36 degrees today. It wasn't so bad. I just dropped my daughter off at the American Legion where she's playing pool, and I suspect I won't be asking her to walk back.
Yeah, I'm sure it's cold. All right, so I want to get to a couple of things really quick because I do want to get our guest in as soon as we can. We have a lot to talk about with her. There has been there's some news in the industry, in the business of comics. I recommend that people go to check out the Comics Beat. There's a great article with a lot of really good reporting from Heidi McDonald about Diamond having a very bad few weeks. That actually is that they have been late. They have been late 3 weeks in a row, and they are expecting to continue to be late. It is a problem. Some people are stating that it has to do with the rushed closing of the Plattsburgh distribution center, but this combined with the announcement, I think it was yesterday or today, that Boom is leaving Diamond as an exclusive distributor effective July 1st, which everybody expected because Penguin Random House bought them. They're going to get distributed through Penguin Random House. That is, it's got people a little up in arms.
Yeah. I mean, I really don't have mixed feelings about this. I can't say that I was thrilled with Diamond's long-standing monopoly because I'm opposed to monopolies in general, and because it did hurt a lot of the newer publishers at the time.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is that Diamond was one of the first. That Steve Geppi has been there since he was a mailman, and I've known him since then. And he's done wonders, and the company has done wonders over the years. Things evolve, things change. As I mentioned before the show, what happens to Diamond up in Plattsburgh is something that's happened to a lot of comic book retailers.
Sure.
Which is, your lease is not renewed at the last possible minute,
Sure.
which I think is criminal. Same thing with your lease on your apartment. I mean, it's criminal. But I mean, they've had a great run. I'm not expecting them to go out of business. I hope they don't.
That's the issue. It's concern. It's
concern, right.
It is. There have been rumors, when something like this happens, people start to whisper. There are people are asking what's going on here. There have been some rumors that have been floated. Are they getting sold? Are they in serious financial problems? There's a quote out there. This is attributed to Chris Arendt, who said major things are going on in the background of print comics distribution right now. So there's some downsizing, consolidation, streamlining, and a precarious financial maneuver by an industry giant. Most of this is behind the scenes, but I feel there's some damage control and posturing going on right now. Beginning to feel like the lead up to the seismic changes in comics distribution that we went through in 2020, with the players now involved with this, could be much bigger. So Chris is not making everybody feel calm.
No, and you'll notice the wave of my hand. I am not a fan of predictive journalism, which, by the way, is all we have today.
Sure.
Don't tell me what's going to happen because
Right.
you don't know. Tell me what has happened and what is lining up, but don't tell me this means that these people are going to be dead tomorrow. Fuck
Yeah.
you.
That is
just
fair.
wrong.
That is
Excuse
absolutely
me.
fair.
I'm very emotional about this.
That's fine. I am not. So that is in there. There's a quote here, but the rest of this article, which I'm going to put in the comments because I do want to
As
credit
well you should.
Heidi.
I will be seeing Heidi on Sunday. If she has any follow up, I'll mention it on Tuesday.
Well, yeah, I chatted with her early. I chatted with her earlier. We kind of went back and just both kind of shaking our heads like, I don't know what's going on. It seems weird. Yeah, that's in the comments. Everybody can check that out. I want to say that at the end of it, it's disturbing, especially with the quality of comic books that are coming out today. This has been a really good year in comic books.
Yes, it has.
I think there's been so much good stuff, and we're going to get to some even more stuff when we bring our guest in later. But it has been a great year, I think. I've been spending some time over the past few days, thinking about how to sum up this year. It's been a good year. We're getting to the end of it, and I just want the industry to continue to do well, and thrive.
The comics industry is a lot like the music industry today, which finds itself without good distribution, without good top of the line management at the publishing houses. Maybe you can say that in some of the distribution areas as well. Maybe not. That's complicated. But creators come into it now on their own, like musicians do. You go online, you post your stuff. Hopefully, you can do a fundraiser and publish your own stuff, and maybe if your ambition is to get noticed by or to sell to a publisher, that's a good way to do it. So the creators have more control and more options.
I think that's interesting. It's interesting.
I think ever before.
Yeah, it's great that you bring that up. It's one of the things that I had some of the conversations. So you haven't followed up, but we were at, and we're about to get to this. We were at GalaxyCon Columbus this past weekend, and had some conversation with creators, and we talked. There was someone who was approached by a prospective creator, young person, mid-20s, came up to a established artist and kind of wanted a little bit of portfolio review type stuff. And the answer was that it was there's some promise, but a lot of work needs to be done.
Right.
The irony of this was that the young creator or prospective creator said that what they really want to do is be a voice actor, and they were just kind of building up comics. So they were going to fall back on comics if they couldn't be a voice actor.
Having done both, I can't make a recommendation.
I just don't feel like one is the fallback of the other.
Yeah, I mean,
because
the cliche is that our parents all said, "Well, you should have something good to fall back on."
Right. I say the same thing. I have a son who is a theater major. I want him to continue to do and explore that passion, but I also want him to be realistic that you still need to put food in your mouth, and it's not going to be me.
As Bill Willingham told me almost 40 years ago, I can always flip burgers.
All right.
He went on to better things, although not necessarily better burgers.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm not an expert on Bill's burger experiences, but
no, I have never.
Our next guest might be, but we'll get to that later.
That's true. Good point.
All right. So while we were at Columbus, we had the fantastic experience, and I haven't talked about this. Didn't talk about this last on Tuesday because I wanted you to be here because I wanted to share this with you.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
I will be putting this together. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I had a migraine.
I understand.
I literally couldn't see an hour before the broadcast.
I that is fine with me. I understand. Everybody, does the thing. My issue is that I wanted to share this with you. So at the university at Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, there is a library, and in that library there is a special collection section called the Billy Ireland Cartoon Library and Museum. And Billy Ireland was a cartoonist in Chicago, in Columbus, and now I've lost my head. 1 second. And the library is one of the largest, if not the, I don't know who's in top, and the people do these things. One of the largest collections of cartoon art and comic book art in the world. We were given a special tour by the head librarian and their version of Karen Green by the name of Jenny Robb. Jenny is lovely. She has agreed to be on the show, so we may have her on in the new year. We could talk about even more stuff. We were taken back into the vault. Like, if the door is open to that for more than 60 seconds, the police come. So we had to all get in quick. It is hermetically sealed. It is environmentally controlled. Listen, we pushed Shooter in. He was there. We pushed him in. He got in time. In the 60 seconds.
You had told me that Jim does not appear to be.
Jim is in a wheelchair these days. But hopefully he'll make any sort of recovery or continue to be around for a while. But yeah, he's but we all got in, and I'm going to share some of the images I saw there with us. This is what was kind of waiting for us.
Oh, they spelled it right.
They did. This is when you first walk into the vault. This is I forget who the artist is, but this was commissioned by Burke Breathed. And he had it in his house and eventually gave it to the museum. But it's very cool. This is the first thing, and you turn in and there's these aisles and aisles of flat files. We saw some original art. This is an original of Terry and the Pirates. I mean,
the greatest comics exercise ever accomplished by humanity. Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates.
Yeah. It is fantastic. Like we had this great experience. This is another, but it's turned sideways. Same picture. Really, really crazy stuff. Oh, this is why I wanted it, because this is registered U.S. Patent Office, 1939. This is from 1939. This original. I guess it's a Sunday comic. I don't know why that happened, but they're just lined with stuff, all kinds of interesting things that are there. There's a whole bunch of creepback stuff back here. So they have stuff from all over the world.
Do you have photos of that?
I did not get interior photos of that.
I have an original of his.
There's a whole couple of rows of manga, like all kinds of manga that they've collected. And one of the things that this museum does is that they try to be completionist without being. I'm sorry. There's a word. They want to get one of everything. They don't want to get everything of everything. So they're not collecting everything that's coming out and trying to get everything. They just want to have a representation of everything that's out there. This piece is
that's one way to not go crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So the best part was this tour was with a bunch of creators.
Name
People
drop.
in the room with me were Megan Hutchinson, Tom Zoller, um, uh, and Jim Shooter, and Howard Chaykin, and Liana Kangas. It was a fun trip. This page was placed in front of us, and I forget why we were talking about it, but everyone just immediately said, "Oh, well, it's Trimpe's Hulk," and then we all tried to figure out who inked it until we came upon that it must be Marie, and we agreed that it must be Marie.
Mm.
And it's beautiful.
Brilliant.
This page,
Marie is just one of the most underrated cartoonists in history.
right? This page was great. This caused a lot of she had a couple of pages out that were interesting. There was a Kurt Swan page. I don't know if I have that. I thought that was super interesting because on the originals, in the lettering, the bolded words were underlined in blue, had blue underlined pencil, and I wasn't sure if he had written it out in short pencil ahead of time what the words were, and then underlined the word that was going to be bolded, and so that's how he knew to do that. This page is Gene Colan art, which prompted Howard Chaykin to say, "I don't get Colan," which caused everybody to laugh. Because what?
When you asked him why, what was his response?
Oh, he went in. He's like, "I don't get it." He didn't like this top panel because he thought that the horizontal line was here and the perspective was off. He seriously went into how he does not understand the fascination with Gene Colan and why he is so revered, because he doesn't think he's not a fan of his work. But it caused quite a stir because the curator is giving us this, "Oh, look at this wonderful page," and he's like, "Yeah, I don't get it." But that's Howard. One of the key parts of this museum, which is fantastic, and I will put in the comments, a link to it. You can go, you can schedule tours. They're open. They have a reading room that's open for just access during normal college time. If you're ever in Columbus, you need to go there. This is the last Calvin and Hobbes. Most of Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes originals are at this facility.
Yeah.
He never sold any of it. He gave some away, but everything else is here.
Yeah. Huh. Breathtaking. So, while you were in Columbus, were you able to pick me up one of those great black Nazi flags?
There weren't any of them. I didn't see any. I stayed inside. It was too cold. I didn't want to go outside.
They didn't have a gift shop?
What's that?
They didn't have a gift shop.
No gift shop for the Nazi flags, no.
Joan Rivers did a routine towards the end of her career that I thought was the most gutsy thing I ever heard in comedy. And the name of the routine is the Auschwitz Gift Shop.
Mm.
And it's absolutely hilarious. It's in evidently the worst taste humanly possible, but that's okay. It's absolutely hilarious. You'll never see it on TV. Well, I shouldn't say that. You'll never see it on broadcast.
I will find it somewhere.
I
So this piece is like from 1700 something or other. This is an original piece of art that was published, and it is lampooning one of the first women scientists. She was known to be a scientist. She was this was out there. So some cartoonist felt necessary to draw a picture of a comet farting in her general direction. And that is what this is.
I did not know comets farted.
Well, neither did they. So they figured that they did.
Good point.
So, but this is some of the amazing stuff that's there. This is a letter to Walt Kelly from the National Cartoonist Society, from I don't know who. This is a great page, which is funny. This is some original some of the African American art that is there. What people noticed was interesting was that this article here, robot pickers to force 2 million from Dixie, which is basically, we're talking about, the same things we talk about today, where science is invading into people's business or people's livelihoods.
That's what science does.
It's been going on for forever, and we just have to deal with it. Yeah. So these are Bungleton Green.
I'm a huge fan.
Yep. So these are Bungleton Green pages. That's what that story is.
I'm a huge fan of a strip that 99 out of 100 comics fans, white comics fans certainly, had never heard of.
This is an original strip of Peanuts from 1955 that was gifted to someone else and ended up. And there's a signature inscription here from Charles Schultz. These are the kind of things we found in this vault. This page is sideways, but I thought it was hilarious because it's a Paul Levitz written, Steve Ditko penciled, inks by Romeo Tangau, and then colorist is Adrian, and letterer is Gaspar. Colorist and the letterer only get first names because they're just that good, right? Is that how it works?
No, I think Gaspar just forgot how to spell his name.
Well, listen, I mean, it is signed. He did sign it.
He did. Gaspar was a great guy.
All right, we're gonna try. I'm gonna try. There's a ton of stuff here, and please, there's more to come. So stay tuned to Pop Culture Squad, and I'll put more in there because I want to get to our guest. But this is the highlight of the issue. So,
do you have the link to the museum?
The museum is already linked in the comments. Everybody can go check it out, find out more about it, see if you can schedule a tour. Please do that. We went into the reading room and we were looking around, and that's where I saw that page with Gaspar and Adrian's name on it. There's a bunch of comics pages they had out on the tables, and I came across this page, and I freaked out a little bit. Freaked out a lot. This is a page from Heroes for Hope. This is a page. This particular piece of paper has ridden the New Jersey transit system. I know this because it's one of the first things I ever did for Pop Culture Squad when I talked to John Workman about his thing with Walter. This is a page that was written by Harlan Ellison, penciled by Frank Miller, inked by Bill Sienkiewicz, and lettered by John Workman. And please go back and read on Pop Culture Squad when Thor rode the bus. But there's a long story that went behind it. But essentially, there's a lot about this page that I know. I know this page very well. The lettering is over twice. The lettering had to be redone over what was originally put there, but they couldn't move any boxes. They couldn't move any of this. So John Workman had to rewrite it and then put it on vellum and paste it inside the existing boxes, and then it got sent back via bus. But I was freaked to see this actual page, and I went to I'm like, do you know what you have here? Do you know about this page? So then I was able to give them a bunch of information and tell them about some of the things. It was truly thrilling.
Why was it rewritten?
Because Harlan was late. And because Harlan was late, and they were running up against press, some Marvel editors decided that they should just put words in so they could get it printed. And then Harlan found out about it before it got printed and got really mad and threatened legal things. And so they said, just give us the script, at which point he did. So then it had to get relettered.
One of my greatest regrets in history is that in 2016, Harlan did not run against Donald Trump.
That would have been hilarious. You're absolutely right about that. Yeah. So I have more pictures, and I'll put them up there. They're one of the things that was another highlight of mine. They have in there just presented out the cover to Legends of Wonder Woman #1, which is the Trina issue, the first Trina issue. But, and I'm going to bring in our guest in just a second. The cool part was, as we're in the reading room, where we're looking around, I'm standing there, and Megan Hutchinson points, kind of nudges me and says, "Oh, look, and this is what we see in this museum: Pastimes in Comic Book Editing by none other than Shelly Bond."
Yeah.
And so I'm like, "Oh, well, good. I'm going to talk to her." And there we go. So this is comic book art history, and it is in the Billie Ireland Museum, available for people to read. And it was just fun. It was really cool. So
I envy you your tour.
yes,
Karen gave me a
you
tour
should.
of the Columbia stacks, and it was just one of the most amazing moments of my life. It was hardly a moment. I'm amazed she was able to get me out of there. It was just brilliant.
I kept saying to people that I wanted to live in there. So I
Yes.
understand.
Yes. Well, also it's climate controlled.
Yeah, it's nice. It was cool, comfortable, very nice. All right. So without further ado, because we've done a lot of doing, no more doing. And here, welcome to the show for the very first time on the Pop Culture Podcast Live, Ms. Shelly Bond.
Whoa. Whoa.
Good music.
What an introduction. Thank you so much for having me on live today. And
Well, thanks for being here.
I loved all of your doing. But Mike, I got to call you out because I thought I was getting such a great segue from that beauty shot of Fast Times at the Billie Ireland, because I went to the Billie Ireland last year. We were guests of CXC, which was a phenomenal convention. And Bob, I was reliving those glorious moments of going into the vault and just my being gobsmacked and sweating from all of this beautiful comic book art over the ages. But yeah, Mike, I was giggling. I got to come back to Mike for a second. I was like cracking up because I was backstage and you guys were talking about Howard Chaykin. And I really don't care what Howard Chaykin thinks about Gene Colan. No big deal. I want to know what Chaykin said when he saw that comet farting. Come on. Now spill. Bob.
Well, he didn't say much, but I will tell you one other thing. She was showing us, this is the other best Howard Chaykin story, is that she was showing us this zine, and it was like, kind of two folded pieces of paper and stapled together that had been sent from somebody to somebody else, and they had a copy of it, and it was a zine from like 1964 or something like that, that somebody had done, and it was to put this in the right way. So the creator of the zine had been recently to visit the museum and saw it and said, "Oh wow, the version you have is actually better than the version that I have of it from all those years ago." And the person who had created that zine was Art Spiegelman. To which point Howard said, "Fuck that guy." So
funny. That is so Howard.
That's Howard 101. Yeah. And I was aware of his attitude towards Mr. Spiegelman. It's Howard is wonderful if you just need an abstract insult. Pay attention to Howard, write stuff down. You'll use it later on in a good context.
Well, I must say, if you want me to lunge right in, my favorite Howard Chaykin experience, because of course I worked with him many times in my career. My favorite Howard moments were always the times when he would make the trek from California once or twice a year to New York to go through the theater district and see as many Broadway shows as physically possible for one human.
I don't know that it's physically possible.
I know it's not, but he manages.
Yeah, I understand. So, I don't know how, but he does.
Howard would come in.
Really wealthy, that's why.
He could be, or his wife might be wealthy. Who knows? So Howard would come in, and it was always the same song and dance. It didn't matter if one year I was suffering from a horrendous cold and I was working 24/7 and I looked terrible because I was coughing and sneezing and I worked anyway. Or maybe the next year I was all like dressed up because I was actually like headed out to a concert or something. It was always the same with Howard. He'd walk in the room and he'd say, "Shelly, you look fabulous." Now, Mike, how would you rate my performance there of Howard Chaykin? It was
not bad,
right?
Not bad. The timing is right.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. I mean,
he has the same affection for Sherry. He enjoys her as well.
I'm not sure he enjoys me, by the way.
Well, so he does. So I actually had that conversation with him as you and I were texting that night after the Billy Ireland Museum. I said, what's your experience? He said he enjoyed working with you. He had no problems working with you. He said it was you knew what you were doing. So
I'm shocked, but thank you.
He had words to the contrary to some of your coworkers, but that we won't get into that.
Honestly, it was a great pleasure to work with Howard, and I won't go too deep into the story, but I know Bob knows the story. Mike, you might not know the story, but I encountered Howard's work first when I was at Kamiko, way back in the late 80s, because I was reading Black Kiss on the train to work, and I was kind of bothered by it. I was 22 years old, right out of college, a feminist, was just kind of digging my feet into comics and what they were all about, and loved black and white comics like Love and Rockets because it was punk rock. But I wasn't sure about Black Kiss. It was like really out there. And I thought the art was cool. I thought it had a great graphic design sense. But it wasn't as much Howard's writing on that book, but it was Lou Stathis's writing on the inside front cover, because Lou was Howard's editor. So flash forward to many years after that, and I was an editor at Vertigo, and so was Lou Stathis. Lou had big plans, to bring Howard to Vertigo. And sadly, as you guys know, Lou passed away, unfortunately, way too young. And I decided that I was going to keep an eye on the proposals that Lou actually had been working on. And I knew he had his heart set on bringing Howard to Vertigo. So I was going to absolutely, without fail, make that happen. And so that's really why I worked with Howard. I wasn't a super fan. I really respected him and appreciated American Flag, but push all that aside, I did it for Lou. And I'm so glad I did, because I had some great experiences working with him on American Century. And most of all, working with him on Bike Club, with David Fishman and David Hahn. And so, great guy, very stylish, knows a lot about theater. We did a lot of singing and dancing over the years. And he's very Howard. He's one of a kind.
That's very true. And that would be his epitaph.
That is true. That is absolutely fair. One of a kind.
I was a fan of Howard stuff from like the Mike Friedrich Star Reach days. I mean, his earliest stuff. And Howard hates that stuff, and I understand why. I mean, most artists hate their early stuff, but I understand why. He was learning the craft. But watching him figure it out, watching him get better, allow himself to do more talking through design, is an amazing experience, amazing growth experience. One of the reasons why Flag was so successful was because it was the exact right moment in his skill set. Everything he had done had come up to that point.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing to hear you put it like that. I mean, of course, I thought his Star Wars covers were pretty amazing, and I think you hit it on the head though, Mike, when you said he was at the right moment at the right time, and it complemented his skill set. I remember someone at DC back in probably the late 90s or early 2000s. I don't remember who, but it was definitely one of the old guard. Told me some fun stories about Howard. And whenever he talked about him, he called him Howie. And he said Howie was the most impeccably dressed person in their studio, whether he was wearing a suit or a fedora or whatever he was wearing. The ladies loved him, and he was very suave. And I always thought that was funny because he was always referred to as Howie. And I never heard anyone call him Howie before that moment or again.
Don't do that.
I once referred to him as Howie to be a sarcastic son of a bitch, which I have been known to be. But I did it once on purpose. We were at a party at First Comics on the roof of our building. We were having a barbecue, and Howard just, I mean, he knew what I was doing, but he just glared at me, and I never pulled that one again.
Ooh, that glare! I know some people actually turn to lava when they get that glare. So I'm glad you're still around, Mike. Seriously. Forget about Stone. Forget about Stone. Sorry?
Yeah. You know, there are personalities in this business, and I'm not just referring to comics. Like Howard, we were talking about Howard Ellison a little earlier. It's that sort of thing. People who are just really gifted, very much themselves. You know, there's no two Howard Chaykins out there. You can't imagine a second Howard Chaykin, and if the two ever met and they touched each other, Earth would explode.
Hold on a second, time out. You just gave me a good moment to just say, what about his doppelganger?
Well, you know, that's a great thing. I like doppelgangers. You're at a perfect time here. I'm going to tell you right now that Shelly, this show goes as we can. Like, you guys have both brought up something that I want to talk about. So I was, you know, we have to figure out where we're going to talk about. I think we're going to put a pin in it. I'm going to come back to this topic, but I do want to get into your doppelganger, or the doppelganger that we're going to be talking about. Currently funding iDoppelganger on Kickstarter.
That's right.
I love the title.
What a segue.
Right?
It is. We're good. Listen,
Mike,
she's a good writer. She's a good writer.
The two of you have been like super simpatico. So I'm thrilled. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for putting that up on the screen.
Well, it's going to be, the link to it is in the comments, but I also want to tell you that, you know, I think I did this. I forget what it was, but I've backed like over 200 something Kickstarters in my career, in my life, whatever, and a bunch this year. This is the book I'm most excited to get. I cannot wait to get this book. I am super excited for it. It is, and mostly because you've been building a story in, you know, disguised as a how-to book series, and I'm looking forward to the completion of the story along with the how-to stuff.
I like how you just said it, disguised as. I'm all about operative words, and I loved that way of phrasing it, Bob. Really. Yeah, I guess it kind of is disguised in some ways, but I'm being truthful when I tell you that part one of my graphic novel or graphic memoir editing trilogy was 80-20. 80% how to make comics or your own comics, not just better, but maybe level up. And 20% my life as an editorial ingenue, walking the halls of DC Comics, not unlike Mike Gold long ago. And Fast Times is
I'm well known for being an ingenue, yes.
Well, at some point in your life, you must have been, right?
I
So
guess.
Fast Times was the opposite ratio. So it was 80% fun times in New York City and working at DC Comics and 20% craft. But I kid you not, Bob, I doppelganger is 50-50. And it was a hard way to figure out how am I going to end it, and how am I going to end it so it feels really satisfying and balanced. And there was really no other way. So forget the 80-20, 20-80. This is 50-50, you and me, meaning 50% lessons learned up, down, around the corporate ladder. And not just at DC Comics, at other companies that I've worked for. And then it's 50% how to level up and not only give people my editing advice for those who want to edit their own work or work with others and find ways to work with friends and relatives, the uncomfortable kind of editing where you kind of don't want to do it, but you kind of have to because someone asks or someone pays you. But ways to actually trick yourself into doing things in comics that you really don't want to do, like writing and lettering, things I've been doing, like sometimes just getting up in the morning and figuring out how am I going to free write today? Because if you do it for 15 minutes a day, by the end of 3 months, you've got a lot of words to work with. So you're right. I kind of disguised it a bit, but I'm really hoping that this volume, which encompasses a lot, it's the 21st century, people. So it's like 2000 to 2024. It's a long period of time, but this is like my best of highs and lows, everything in between, and also how to get over yourself and how to remain a respectable human. Because like Mike said before, when I was backstage, comics and the music industry, they've got a lot in common, and there's some shitty behavior in both areas, and both industries can't seem to get out of their own way in terms of distribution and in terms of parity, in terms of diversity and respect, and getting more women in charge. And I'm not talking about assistant editors and a handful of editors within a large company. I'm talking at the top, leading the charge and starting a revolution. Mic drop.
Let me remind you that a woman publisher hired me at DC.
Jeanette Kahn, I suppose. And it hasn't been the same without her. I think we can safely say that.
I think that's
the power in Jeanette's position, being hired to that position, particularly at a moment in time when Ms. Magazine was just launching, and the media attention was on that sort of thing because the first cover of Ms. Magazine was of Wonder Woman, and then so Jeanette sort of became Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And in point of fact, she was. So that's a good call right there. I'm having a hard time thinking of other women in the field or men in the field, for that matter, who had that much of an impact as she did in the 1970s. We're talking like Eisner, and then Jeanette.
I'll grant you that. I want people to go and look at this campaign, the way that this is set up. It is set up as if I was, reading a comic strip. The pieces of art. Who's doing the drawing there? Is it Imogen or Art by Lid?
The campaign art is by Art by Lid, and her real name is Lindsay Thomason, but Art by Lid is the name she goes by. So she is phenomenal.
She is.
But
This is wonderful.
thank you. You can tell. I think you can see some of her inspirations from her
Sure.
art. Very big fan of Scott Pilgrim,
Yep.
but this is her first comics publication, and I'm so honored that she's agreed to jump off the diving board here with me. But I will tell you that Imogen is back as well, and it's so great to have her in the book. And we've got some of your favorite people illustrating, including
Sure.
Mark Buckingham, who is doing a short comic
Nice.
for me, and David Hahn, which I'm thrilled to say has a wonderful story about the origin story, actually, of Bite Club.
That's great. It's funny because David Hahn was part of my conversation with Howard Chaykin the other night.
Oh yeah,
Yes, about how he likes him and other people don't, and it diminishes those people in Howard's eyes for not respecting or understanding how David Hahn.
you know, I'm with Howard there too. David is such a top-notch person and an incredible artist, and
Yes.
it was such a pleasure to work with him on both Bite Club and the sequel, Vampire Crime Unit. And those books, I think, will always go down in history for me as like some of the most fun times I had on a miniseries that just like captured the zeitgeist. You know, I think at that time, and you'll probably remember, Bob and Mike, I think you might remember back in those days, everywhere you looked on TV, somebody was spoofing Law and Order and those shows, CSI. And I just loved the idea that we were going to do it Vertigo style. So it was just a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
We here, and this is mostly because Bob, due to Bob's leadership, really back crowdfunding projects. We try to put the light on them, and I think we're going to continue doing that until our next president totally trashes the banking system, which he announced today.
Which could happen very soon then, which is terrifying. But continue.
Yes, and I agree with that. It is terrifying, but as long as there's like money, we need to get it in creators' hands.
Yep.
And the beautiful thing about crowdfunding is that it eliminates often, not always, the middle people, the folks in between. We started off tonight talking about Diamond. You know, this is an alternative distribution form. It's the beginning of an alternative distribution form. It is also the beginning of a tool that can be used to save the medium, which, as Bob pointed out earlier, is doing some of the greatest work ever. Now, by ever, we're talking 85 years, but still.
Yeah.
My God.
Right?
You know, you look at the racks today,
Mm.
and it's like, what can I pick from? I don't have time to read little money to read all the stuff I want to read.
It is so true. There's enormous amount of content out there. And I say that with like silly air quotes just because it's the greatest thing in the world to have choices. And I think there's something for every taste. You know, if your storytelling is more eclectic, if your storytelling is very straight up superhero, you've got a lot of choices. The beauty of Kickstarting, though, you hit it completely. You kick the middleman in the shins and they fall over and they can't walk for a while. And that's okay. Because I say to people, there's nothing greater than doing everything myself, but that's how I've always been. Got into comics through the punk rock channels, never suspected that I would be at a corporation for 22 and a half years. A lot of that had to do with Karen Berger, who, you know, we did mention Jeanette. Well, Karen's right up there with a true innovator of the medium. And Mike, I know you worked with Karen, so you have a similar respect. But the greatest thing about Kickstarter is that no one can stop you, which means you can get your art published on your terms and in your time. So, for instance, I put out Filth and Grammar and Fast Times in about 8 months from kickstarting to fulfillment, give or take a couple of months because of pandemic overflow or paper shortage. My Doppelganger took a little bit longer, and I think it's for reasons that Bob intimated earlier. I had to sum it up. I had to really cherry pick and winnow it down to the essence of the message of what I wanted to impart, because this is it. I always wanted to set out to do a trilogy. I blame it on Grant Morrison, because when we did The Invisibles, Grant pitched that to Vertigo as a trilogy, and I learned a lot from Grant. And if there's one important thing I learned from him is announce something, go big, go wide, and then deliver eventually. So I had no excuse. I couldn't renege on this. I started with Filth and Grammar. I knew that there was going to be a middle part, Fast Times, but here we are. We're at the end of the line here. And I'm glad, because it's kicked my butt, and now it's really happening, and it's invigorating.
We're gonna come back to The Invisibles.
Well, yes, we are. I have to jump in here because
Go ahead.
I'm a prick.
Uh-oh.
How do you like editing yourself?
Editing myself is a tricky thing. When you go from being a comic book editor for 34 years and forcing yourself to write because you can't afford a writer and an artist during the pandemic. And that's the only reason I started writing. I was meeting all these wonderful young people through anthologies that I started and worked on 2020, 2021. I think Bob was a big supporter of Insider Art and Heavy Rotation. So those projects only came together because they were a reaction to people being miserable, people being negative, and people just getting frustrated with big companies, hitting the skids and not even buying proposals. I mean, if you think about it, people used the pandemic as an excuse for 3 years after the pandemic, which is lame. So editing myself is tricky because I also letter. But Mike, to be fair, I have an editor, and I've had 2 on Filth and Grammar, but I had Will Potter on Fast Times, and he continues to have my back on my Doppelganger. And I also want to make it clear that Imogen Mangle is also considered an editor on this book, because Imogen, who at 26 years old is wise beyond her years, really helped me kind of crash through some of the darker, tougher parts of what I want to impart to her generation. And I should say that Art by Lit is also 26. And one of the greatest things that I think I could have done with this book is hire the 2 of them to do the bulk of it as far as the art. Because I was 26 when I walked into DC Comics as the final Vertigo editorial hire. And I will tell you, you too?
I was 26 when Jeanette hired me.
Well, there's something about that. You're not a fresh-nosed kid right out of college. You got some experience under your belt. You know who you are, and more important, you know who and what you want to be. And you are going to work for it no matter what, no matter who gets in your way, and no matter how much blood, sweat, or tears you're going to have to go through to put your name on something that you represent. So the 2 of those wonderful artists, to be the age that I was when I consider my life beginning, has a really symbolic and important effect on all of my writing in the book and on how I want to leave my legacy, as it were, with this body of work.
That's the crazy thing that you can't really be aware of when you're in the middle of it. But when you get to be my age, assuming other people survive as long as I have.
You are not that old, by the way. You really aren't. I'm not kidding. I know your real age, and it's not that old.
But I copped out a Tuesday show because of my migraine. That happens. But we do have a legacy. And my daughter used to get really upset when we do a convention and people would respond to that, because I'd always be taken aback. Because I can't see me while I'm being me, you know? So making that transition that you've made, not only writing, but going out there on your own as an independent packager, if you will, not a good term.
But a fair term, an accurate term.
A fair term.
So not on my own. I hate to interrupt you, but with my husband, the amazing Philip Bond. I know you had a great chat with him a month or two ago. So I'm going to throw his name in there, because without him, I'm nothing. Mic drop.
And that's great. I mean, that's the way it should be. Comics is a collaborative medium made up of individuals who work alone in the dark.
I want to
flashlight, and sometimes with a sparkler. And when I'm writing, I like to put a sparkler in my eye, because I dislike nothing more intensely than writing. So the fact that I'm even 86% finished with iDoppelganger is a bloody miracle. But continue.
Well, I wanted to bring up a couple of things, if I can.
I don't want to cut him off, but he is my editor.
There's a lot of comments that need to be adjusted. But you wrote, there's something on the page, and I highlighted it, and it caught me. It says, at its core, iDoppelganger is how to make better comic books and original graphic novels, how to make a better comic book industry, and how to chart your own path while remaining a respectable human, making urgent art so you can leave your mark on history's pages.
That's it.
And I love that. And I think that's brilliant. And I think it's really wonderful. I want to take that and kind of transition into what you guys have been talking about. One of the things I had written down that I wanted to bring up, and I think you guys are a great pair to talk about it. So there's something about comic books, and I've said this before, and I'll say it till my dying day. Comic art is subversive as its nature. It's not good. And
just like rock and roll.
Right. there are multiple types of comics that we experience today. Some of them, and I get this because I talk to a lot of different creators who work for a lot of different avenues of the industry. There's comics as chaotic art, as I'm trying to figure out how to develop an image so that when it's scanned and printed, it looks a certain way. And then there are people who just, draw in a certain way. And there are people who are going to take an idea and figure out how to break this down into pages and scripts and this, versus someone who is doing work for hire stuff where they're given a character, they come up with an idea, they write a script, somebody gets that script, they draw pages, they hand it in. Like, there is certain level of assembly line corporate media that we get out of comics. But how do I think that both of you at larger corporate entities were able to produce that more chaotic art comic stories. What inspired you to do that, and how do we get more of it?
Mike can go first because he's older.
Oh, thank you.
By a little bit. Tiny
really?
bit. Yeah.
I can't believe that.
Oh, yeah.
You're closer to my age than his, and he's
not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Wow. I am amazed that I was at DC for 9 years, because I do not get along well in a bureaucratic environment.
Well, I don't get along well with others, so we do have that in common.
Well, yeah, that's true, and I'm a fighter. I will. That's right. I will fight for my artist's creative vision, as I will fight for my publisher's needs. that in the corporate environment, that's what you have to do, which is a ridiculously schizophrenic existence, unless you're an asshole like me, or a very creative person like you. It's a tough experience, but I love it because we get our best work out of ourselves under that type of pressure, under that type of creative pressure. Because when I just said we work alone in the dark in a collaborative medium, that's how creativity works. Creativity starts in the dark.
Yeah.
We try to fill it with, in comics, we try to fill it with wonder. And we're pretty good at it. Better than most media, I think, although I'm highly prejudiced.
I pretty much agree with everything you said. I think the only reason I stayed at Vertigo for so long was because of what the imprint stood for. It wasn't the name Vertigo, which I laugh. You know, people that talk to me about and ask me my opinion about the new Vertigo. What do I think it's going to be? I have no idea, and it doesn't matter. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, tell us, because one of the things I just wanted to impart is Vertigo was never about a name. It was always it's about the idea that Karen brought to the table, which is hire really smart, diverse editors who have very strong points of view that are different, and have them pitch her works that are very representative of the times, that are not like anything that has been done before relating to superheroes at DC Comics. And that was my calling card. And I came in there guns a-blazing with my love for music and foreign film and tap dancing and all the other things that make up my DNA, in addition to my newly discovered love for comics since college. And I was all over it. And I was lucky. I was lucky that she supported my vision, but I never had aspirations to write comics or edit superhero comics or do anything other than find things within myself that I wanted others to see and connect with people on a deeper level through this incredible art form. But Bob, tell us about Vertigo.
Well, without revealing any sources, my understanding is that what we're going to expect, what we can expect from Vertigo, the new Vertigo, is it is going to be DC's label for creator-owned comics. But there's no direct, there's not an overarching direction. DC doesn't have any creator-owned comics at this point. They have the Black Label version of stuff, which is where they do the more mature version of, you know, established licensed characters. So these will be books that are not licensed characters, just creator owned. It's not going to be, there's not, I don't know that there's going, it's just going to be labeled like, and my understanding was that The Nice House by the Sea was supposed to originally come out with the Vertigo label, but they weren't ready for it for whatever reason. So issue 1 came out without it. Subsequent issues are going to have that on it.
Well, which makes it not a Vertigo book anyway, right, to begin with. Because I think the thing about Vertigo is that, you know, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, because you knew Karen back in the days before I knew her. I mean, Karen was editing subversive and provocative superhero books that became known as the Burger Books around the offices at DC Comics, and that evolved into Vertigo. So she had been working on it for a number of years. I was the last person in December of 92. So it was all set up before I got there. I just had to show up and look good and help out. And I felt really honored. Believe me, I felt so honored about that. But she had it. They were working on it for years. It wasn't just like, hey, let's bring an imprint together, but let's do it before we're ready. Oh, and well, it doesn't matter if we don't have the logo on the first issue, we'll do it anyway. That's not how my understanding of how Vertigo started.
Right.
As in the original Vertigo. So I call it the original Vertigo, and I have absolutely no.
It's not Vertigo.
Well, I have to tell you, I like Chris Conroy a lot. And I remember when he was in the mailroom, he's running Vertigo now, and he was terrific person when I worked with him back in the day. And
Mhm.
it's exciting to see him go up the ranks like I did. You know, he worked real hard and he was a huge fan of a lot of Vertigo titles. I know he was an Invisibles fan because he used to stick his head in my office to just tell me how great he thought the book was. So I wish him a lot of luck. He's also a Roisin Murphy fan, so we have some musical tastes that are superior that I suggest you check out. Bob and Mike,
Mhm.
Roisin Murphy of Moloko. So I don't wish anyone any ill will, but I just can't wait for the moment when like the bells go off and people realize that Vertigo could have been called Portal, which was one of the contenders back in the day. I believe that was the story I was told. It could be called something else, but it it's it's a vision and it needs preparation and it needs gravitas and a mission statement. You know, it needs it's not just like a series of generic ideas. So that's just my 2 cents. Perhaps they'll run it differently and I hope and I wish them well because the more success we have in comics, all of
The better
comics,
it is.
the better it is for all of us. So
Yes.
this is a good moment for me to tell people that, you know, I Doppelganger is not a tell-all. And Bob, I'm sure you noticed that was like in all caps.
I noticed
In
and was disappointed.
I know you're disappointed, but you know what?
We'll talk about that after the
I
show.
tell some. I will tell some. And the running line that I have for the book that I told David Walker years ago, you might know his work on Bitter
I
Root.
do.
He's
I
a
do know
great
David.
friend and a wonderful writer. I
Wonderful
told
writer.
David that I had toyed with calling I Doppelganger. If you were nice to me, you have nothing to worry about. And he told me that was the perfect title for the book. But I hesitated because I know people will think I'm just going to be obnoxious and I'm going to spill stories and secrets that aren't mine to tell.
Was your name Alan Moore?
Oh, not the last time I checked.
Well,
Or
then
Howard
we have
Hughes.
nothing to worry about, I guess, right?
Well, I just wanted to make it clear, like my goal for this book is that from the first sentence to the last sentence, anyone who's reading it is going to feel emboldened to grab a piece of paper and grab anything to write with, whether it's red pen for me and for Bob or marker, pencil, and make comics. Because Bob, just to finally get back to your question, right? I'm getting back to your question, Bob. Can you believe it? I talk in circles, a circuitous way, I guess. But I have to honestly tell you that any art is great art if it's coming from your heart and it's authentic and it's a way for you to leave your footprint in the world.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that the next generation of comics historians, when it's time for that generation to make their lists of the most influential people in the medium, Karen will be on the short list. What she did in creating Vertigo, she started years beforehand without, and I don't think she planned it to be exactly what it was, but she knew what she wanted and she knew where to get it and she knew how to put it together. And she changed DC Comics. She changed and she helped open up the door to broadening the types of stories that we could tell and sell in a comic book store at the very least.
And the people who made them. Because in Karen's time, you know, talk about few women in comics, especially in editorial or above editorial, like Jeanette Kahn as a publisher or president. So I think you have to also consider Karen not only someone who pushed storytelling and pushed into different arenas of storytelling and not just stories about good versus evil, but she gave me a break and she gave many other women opportunities. And that was huge. And in the 90s, it was such a great thing to be able to hire more women. And there were so many women in the Vertigo group. And I loved that. You know, whenever we had an opportunity to encourage women to come in, it was great. They didn't have that trepidation whereas in other industries, the sports field, the music industry, right? You know, women very much didn't want to be a part of that locker room. And honestly, when I came into comics, I was lucky to be hired first by Diana Schutz, who gave me the first break I had, and then Karen. And so for me, I want to pay it forward because I think that while the 90s and the early 2000s showed so much promise, I think not unlike our politics, we've gone back to the dark ages in some ways. Now, you can say, oh, Shelley, haven't you noticed that Marie Javins is the editor in chief? I have noticed. I think that's great. And Sierra Hahn is the editor in chief at Oni. There are definitely people that are in charge of companies, big and small, but not enough. If you look at a lot of these smaller companies, these imprints, everyone in any executive position or in the higher editorial positions is usually male. And it's I don't care what anyone says, it should be 50-50 in my humble opinion. And I want to make that happen. And I hope by helping and mentoring the next generation of young cartoonists, we can all step it up.
First of all, our highest obligation is to mentoring.
Yes.
Must be to mentoring. Prime the pump, keep it going, and let it go in new, different, original directions. In 1976, one of the first things I did for DC, Sal Harrison, who's the president of the company, brings me into a meeting with the guy from the ad sales company. They were going to do a survey of the readership, and he wanted my comments on their survey. So I went through the whole survey and I said, well, I think you have a problem here because the way it's written, the questions that you're asking, no woman, no girl, and nobody over the age of 14 is going to respond to this. So this is 1976. DC should have known better in 1976. But no, we had about 35 people on staff, maybe, and other than Jeanette, most all were men. Certainly in editorial. So my response to this, when they said no, we don't want that, was, why don't you want to double your circulation? Think about it. If you're only trying to appeal to men and to boys, which is very much the case here, you're cutting out half the potential readership. People who had read comics in the past still do to a certain extent. X-Men had a strong women following, among others. And you got to move on that. You got to build on that. So bringing in, it takes a long, long time, and that's hideous. And I'm an impatient person anyway. But, it's dominoes. You bring in some people, I realize that the burden on them is horrible. They have to prove, not just themselves, like we all do in a new job, but they have to prove everything for their gender. My God.
Right.
I mean, that's a responsibility nobody signs up for. I mean, no, it's me. You're hiring me. No, it doesn't quite work like that. So when I got to DC, went back to DC in 1986, we had a few women there, Karen, of course, and Barbara Kiesel, and a few others. And today, it's not 50-50, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a hell of a lot better as long as we continue to progress.
It's not. It is good. It's not something to rest on anyone's laurels. I agree with you.
Right. Absolutely.
I want to kind of frame the question here because it's something you guys have both kind of talked about, and again, it's something that I wanted to say because this is how this works tonight. Basically, you guys start talking about something I want to say, we'll refine it. As an editor, when you see a creator that you gave a shot to go on and have a great career, what does that do for you? You've both had experience with this, so what you said, Mike, you mentioned mentoring, and Shelly, you also mentioned that concept of bringing in people. When you have somebody that you've brought in and you see them, really succeed? What kind of a benefit is that for you, that we may even see stuff like that in the books?
It's the most satisfying thing on earth. To watch somebody that you've helped along the way, and others have as well. It's a collaborative medium.
Right.
When you see them really excel, when you see them come out onto their own, doing their own special stuff, that's an enormously fulfilling experience. That's why I'm here. The job of an editor in my book is to be a catalyst and also a rabble rouser, but I'm that in everything I do. Be a catalyst. The catalytic role is critical to our life, our culture, our sanity.
I agree with everything you said, but I'm going to add a little bit to it, Mike. There is nothing more gratifying or rewarding than seeing not just someone who's very talented, like a Bill Sienkiewicz, and just, watching his evolution and knowing he was a superstar probably by the time he could hold a pencil. For me, it's finding a tiny, tiny diamond glitter on the pavement, something really special in a work that no one notices, whether it's a money line that someone delivered off panel because maybe the other editor didn't have the visual acuity to ask the artist to draw a close-up so that the character could deliver it with intent. It's seeing things in people from 50 feet and saying, wow, I wonder what would happen if I actually grabbed that writer by the throat and said, can you try to vary your art direction? Because you're asking for the same 8 panel pages and all your figures are teeny, 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 tiny, and you're not working towards the page turn. So I tend to be the kind of editor who wants to go for the underdog, for the person who's working hard, has red and black ink on their own hands, and see what would happen if I actually said to them, all right, I'm going to give you the opportunity. Are you going to step it up and swing? Let's do this. So for me, it's incredibly gratifying to go into comic book shops or even look on Instagram. And this is how I found Art by Lid. I saw her work and I thought, wow, I didn't know her age. I didn't know if she was a professional editorial illustrator. I saw single images and they were very stylized, but they captured the vibe of the Blitz club kids that I've always worshipped. I mean, I've always been a fan of fandom and a fan fanatic, I might like to say. So I just reached out to her, just questioned whether she was into making comics. Has she ever made comics? Does she want to collaborate? And I started small with her. We did a book called Record Thieves Like Us, where she did spot illustrations. But to wrap up my point, Bob and Mike, thanks for your patience. There's nothing more gratifying than working with someone for years and years on a monthly book or maybe just a series of single illustrations and having them move on to other companies to work with other collaborators. But to me, what's truly gratifying is if those people remember me and thank me by paying it forward later for others. Because there have been so many people that I've extended a hand to, whether it's hiring them for a job or reviewing their portfolio and then taking them out for a coffee because their work wasn't really good enough, and trying to explain to them that I can't draw either, but maybe they should look into editing or marketing, being honest with them. We have to all be honest about our skills. And I always say what you can't do, you have to fake, or just learn a lot about it so you can know the parlance, so you can speak to others in the field. But the truth of the matter is, until you're honest with yourself, if you want to be in comics, there are so few people that are going to be rock star writers and famous illustrators and painters. So if you really want to be a part of the industry, know your skill set and try to go that way. Or maybe you want to be an editorial. So what I see a lot happening is you see a lot of people wanting to break in, and they want to break in fast. and they want to be famous. And it ends up feeling like they're stepping on your neck to move up the ladder. So that's really the only thing I'm adding to Mike's comment. I teach comics editing. So of course I love the craft and the art form. I don't think it's being taught today because corporations are laying off at the top salary because they can. And so they're taking people with the skill set and the knowledge who enjoyed imparting that to associates and assistants, and they're gone. So I think it's important that if an editor helps you, whether good or bad, because some people don't get along and that's fine, but you have to remember that the person that opens the door for you and gives you a shot, they're giving you that opportunity to shine. And so it's really important that you don't forget them. And if you're not friendly with them for whatever reason, maybe you really did butt heads, then pay it forward to someone else, because that's how we're going to continue building on this incredible, exhilarating art form that we all know and love. And that's how we're going to maintain our respectability. And Bob, that's what I'm trying to get to when you pulled out those specific comments that I put in the Kickstarter. Yep. That's what I mean. Because there are so many times in your life at any job where you're going to feel like you worked so hard and you didn't get the promotion, or no one noticed that you contributed a great deal to that book. And, to be really honest, I am going to spill some secrets here because this is my last sort of public speaking interview before the end of the campaign. But one of the reasons I came up with the title I Doppelganger, and Bob, this is probably not going to shock you. Part of it had to do with a story that Imogen Mangle illustrates in the book about David Bowie, my first Bowie show in 1987. I'm not going to spill that part. That's 50% of I Doppelganger's origin story. That's in the book. I'm not saying anything else about that. But the other 50% is because of iZombie. Mm-hmm. I know you're familiar with iZombie, and do you know the iZombie story?
Well, I was watching this show on a word balloon, and I think Mike was talking about it, but yeah, I would love for you to share it. It's interesting because, and it's one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about. I had this, I want to shout out that you had, you did Word Balloon last week, and you had Mike Allred and Steve Siegel on, which is fantastic. That's great. Mike was hilarious.
It was fun.
But I then my head went into a long Mike Allred, whirlpool for a while. But when I want you to tell the story, and then I want, if you guys can talk about this next thing that I wanted. What is it like having something that you saw as a comic book proposal become a comic book and then become a TV show? There's 3 off the top of my head that I can think of with you.
It was amazing. The short story about that, which I know Mike is thinking, how can she ever tell a short story? She's not built to tell a short story. She's short.
You are short.
She's short. I'm diminutive. I can't do a short story. Basically, in 2005, I think, new management from Warner Brothers came in for a visit, and Karen had said to us, everybody has to prepare a pitch. We're going to really try to think about comics that could work in different medium, because we really want to integrate more with Warner Brothers. So as you're coming up with pitches, if you happen to be working on something that might translate to TV or film, bring it and develop it, and who knows. So iZombie was my big one, and it didn't start out as iZombie. It started out as Chris Roberson, who was a friend of Bill Willingham's, who had been working with Bill a little bit on Fables and Fable spin-off series. He wanted to do his own project, and he pitched me a new take on Gravedigger, which was a DC property. And not unlike Karen, which is why we got along, I kind of didn't want to go backwards. I did have a lot of fun with a lot of the DC titles that we had in the early 90s, where we sort of resurrected Shade the Changing Man for a mature audience. Sandman Mystery Theater, of course, same thing. But I kind of didn't want to go backwards. And I thought, well, Chris is giving us a project that had very little to do with the Gravedigger story, not unlike how Steve Siegel and Teddy Christensen used House of Secrets and licensed the name for a completely different series, right? So I talked to Chris, and the story about how Mike came on board, which Mike confirmed is true, is that as I was developing the pitch, I thought I could only see Mike Allred drawing it because Mike draws the coolest characters, and I knew he would get the vibe. So I said to Chris, I think Mike Allred would be great on this book. And he said, someone like Mike Allred. I said, no, Mike Allred, give me a couple of minutes. And I called Mike and I said, Mike, I've got this pitch. It's basically about a gravedigger who has to eat the brains of people that have died, and then she's going to solve these crimes about their murders. And the main character is Debbie Harry, circa CBGBs. I mean, I didn't even finish the word CBGBs, and he said I'm in. Of course, right? Mm-hmm. So I was very much an integral part of that series, and the name came about because I'm sure we volleyed around 100 names, but iZombie came to me because of everybody being obsessed with the iPod. Mm-hmm. Sure. Who didn't have an iPod back in the middle 2000s? And it just seemed right. It just felt right. So I suggested that as the title. And what was great about that is that I knew that Mike loved it, and Mike always gave me credit for that, and gave me credit for anything I've ever contributed to a book where I worked with him. And as Mike knows, when you work for a corporation and you're at the level of hire or position where you're an editor or above, you're basically giving them your creative ideas. So I wasn't expecting money for it. I was paid to do a job. It wasn't like I felt slighted by DC Comics, but I always felt like it was important, that I actually came up with the title and a lot of the backstory, and worked really closely, especially with Mike, on the storytelling and the design. And so I really felt like calling this book I Doppelganger represented me owning it as well, because I don't think Chris Robertson ever publicly mentioned that. I was in the audience of a panel years ago at San Diego, and I remember, and it was a panel with the CW, and I remember somebody asked him where the title came from, and he said he couldn't remember. And I thought to myself, wow, that's too bad, because I'll never forget. And and so that's why I called it I Doppelganger. And look, no diss on Chris, maybe he forgot, and fair enough, but that's something that I'm really proud of. And every book that has a Shelly Bond or Shelley Roberg imprimatur is a book that I represent and that I worked on and I am proud of. So that's the whole story.
That's awesome.
That's actually one of the better comics origin stories I've ever heard.
Wow. And you've heard them all.
It's an origin story.
You have heard them all.
It is.
So I am honored, Mike. That means a lot to me. That happens a lot in comics. That happens, right, Mike? I mean, people will sometimes maybe not even realize that they're taking your big idea, or they sideswipe you.
Yes, and both happens.
Yeah, in any business. Let's be clear.
In any business, both have. That's how Earth works.
Yep.
Earth would be a great place if not for the humans. I would, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I've had mixed experiences with television adaptations. I loved working on the first Flash series back in the 1990, I think. It was great. It was wonderful. Everybody was very respectful of the source material, a trick that Marvel Studios later learned. The John Sable freelance TV series was horrible.
Were you involved in that at all?
No,
I know
not
Mike.
not
I know
directing.
Mike.
I sort of set it up, and that was it.
Okay.
Which is why I was in New York and working for DC by the time the plug was pulled on the show. The last episode, they buried John Sable, and the First Comics staff at the time was the whole staff was in the shot.
Nice.
And I felt a little bad that I wasn't there for that. But, the great strength, I'm amazed, Shelly, that you and I haven't just spent the last hour and a half talking about rock and roll. The amazing thing about my working at DC in 76 wasn't the opportunity or the fact that I'm doing all this cool shit or whatever. It was the fact that I was living in New York at the time that CBGB's et al. Was just exploding.
Yeah.
I was a broadcast disc jockey for a long time, an internet jockey for quite a while. I produced a couple of record albums, emceed some crazy concerts, was on stage at Woodstock.
Whoa.
And, with Pete Townsend, and he was busy beating up my boss, Abby Hoffman. That's another story. So, but it's
we got to hear that one sometime.
This is what I put up with.
It's a fun story, although it's like 55 years ago.
Yeah,
you don't look it. You don't look it.
I had just turned 19. That's an amazing couple of months of my life, I have to tell you. And then the conspiracy trail started. But I think that all of the different influences that I've had, which all overlap incredibly, made me and make me a better editor and a better writer and a better communicator.
Sure.
So as we're giving advice, the caveat I have to add here is get some experience in the world, not necessarily other careers. You don't have to go and become a physician or anything like that. Just some experience. Just get around a little bit, because it's going to influence your work, and it's also going to influence your ability to work with people. And that's really what it's all about. A good editor, in my mind, is an agent provocateur.
Oh, yes.
Now, my problem is I don't know where to stop. But
provocateur just too much.
I'm sorry?
You provocateur a bit much.
And you would do a bit much. That's why you guys are a great tag team. Yes. I love it.
What I'm not going to change at this point in my life.
Well, of course. I want to turn the conversation just a little bit. We've been doing some really cool stuff about what it means to make comics and how it is. I want to lighten things up just a little bit, because part of the preparing for the show is kind of talking back and forth ahead of time. and Mike threw a little, hey, why don't you, if you have any stories about this, it'd be great. And you came back for full context. Mike said, if you have any good Paul Levitt stories, bring those, because those are always good. And you returned with, well, I don't have a lot, but this is my favorite one, and I'm going to put it up on the screen.
Oh, okay.
But
I also brought it, but you put yours up first, because
there you go. It's right here.
Yep.
So the
Great
thing
cover.
is, it's a Brian Bolland cover,
right?
and it's going to start Mike on his story. So what I'm saying is, he threw you a softball and you hit it right back to him, and here he's coming back at you. So let's go into this. So what is the story behind this cover? But also, I want to preface this with, you are two of the editors I like to talk about covers with more than almost any other editors, absolutely, because of the way that you approach them. So go ahead.
All right. I hope I don't disappoint now. You gave me such build.
No, it's fine. Listen,
right.
There's nothing, you cannot disappoint if this cover is on the screen.
Right?
That's right.
I mean,
that's absolutely right.
There was nothing more gratifying than asking Grant what he would like to see on the cover, and then talking to Brian Bolland, and putting our heads together, because most of the time the scripts were not fully written. I might have a few pages which was always helpful, but I usually had a summary. And knowing that Brian had no fear and would always conceptually layer his ideas. And so I think I learned a lot from him in that respect. Like covers to me needed to have 3 unique things about them. And I think, again, I don't think I learned this from anyone in-house, but rather the artists that I worked with day to day, including people like Frank Whiteley and Simon Bisley. And I feel lucky, the best of the best. But Brian is the apex, the top number 1 in my book. And with this one, Grant was pushing boundaries. I mean, I think he was born pushing boundaries. What he did on the Doom Patrol just blew my mind. So I knew with the Invisibles, it was going to be provocative and it was going to be strange. And I just was excited to see how Brian would bring this to the page without being too shall we say, controversial or disgusting. I mean, you're asking the character, you're asking the artist to put a character on a toilet, reading a book, dressed up in leather, smiling. And yeah, when I showed it to Karen, she said, "You're taking this one to Paul." And I thought, well, that's why I've got my name in the credits as the editor. So I wasn't afraid. I don't want to say I wasn't afraid. Now look, Karen and Paul went way back. As most people know, she was his assistant for many, many years. So she pretty much knew him better than anyone. And when Karen would want to get something approved from Paul, she would go into his office, show him a piece of paper, she'd talk to him and give him a brief summary of what she was looking for. And honestly, 9.8 times out of 10, it was just approved without fanfare. Anyone else, forget it. So like I knew I had to go in there prepared. I wasn't just going to be able to sit down and hand him this piece of paper. So of course I was overthinking it, being the type of editor who likes to anticipate every potential disaster coming out of any situation whatsoever. I overthink things to death. I knew I had to have my reasons for this. So I was preparing myself for quite a few hours and really thinking it through, because I had a feeling I was going to have to come in there citing quotations from famous poets and going back into mythology and explaining exactly why this was necessary. Because sometimes with Grant, Grant always had purpose and intent with his writing. So much of it was postmodern and meta. And I'm sure I didn't understand all of it. And I'm sure I overanalyzed everything. So I was going in there to see Paul, and I could have sat in there for 3 days because I had a notebook full of reasons why this was important. And I didn't want to disappoint Grant either. Because if the Invisibles did one thing for comics, it blew our minds as to what could be committed to paper and then predict the future. So I am over prepared, and I am going in there and I'm all dressed up in a like more business-like attire than I would normally wear. Because as my father always said, you want to create a good impression, always dress older than you are and act 10 years older than your age. And he only said that to me because I'm 5'2". And I looked about 11, when I was 26. So I met Paul when I was working for Kamiko. So he always saw me as being a kid. So I knew if I was going to have a meeting with him, I had to dress the part. So I stepped it up. Maybe I left the silver lipstick, behind for that day. And I looked a little more professional than ever. And I was ready to defend my case. So maybe I walked in there feeling like I was a little bit of a lawyer too. And then I was sweating. I was sweating because I was waiting for him to get off the phone, and I was listening to him, and he had a voice that would carry. So I'm sitting in the office, and his assistant secretary, Linda Fields, kept giving me a wait a minute sign, and 10 minutes go by, another couple of minutes. Finally, I hear the phone click, and I'm shaking because come on, I just wanted to walk in. I've got I've got the sketch in my hand. I've got the notebook this thick in marker, all the reasons why this is the cover. And I hand it to him and he said, Shelly, sit down. How are you? And I'm like, blah, 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 explain. This is the cover. This is the intent. And she's like, takes the piece of paper, puts it down at his desk, crosses his fingers, stares at it, looks up at me, looks down at the piece of paper, at the sketch, looks back up at me, goes like this, grabs the paper, hands it back to me. He said, you Vertigo kids. And I said, is that a yes? He's like, go for it. I honest to God, I felt like I was going to faint. I didn't really have to like sell him my case, but I think he understood that Vertigo, that's what we were about. And if we weren't in his office trying to defend and support our writers and artists every once in a while, I don't think we were doing our jobs. And I think he got that where I was coming from at that moment. I think he knew it was probably a little bit in bad taste in his opinion. It was a little weird, it was a little too out there. But I think he respected Grant. And I think he knew Brian Bolland would do a hell of a cover. And I think at that point, he kind of started to see what I was capable of. But that's just my theory. I don't know that for sure. And I think Paul would have to answer that question for you. So if you ever have Paul on the show, please ask him if he remembers that moment. Because that was a turning point for me, I think, in getting, just kind of feeling like I had extra support. I always felt like Karen was in my corner, always felt protected, never felt like I had to like defend myself or, work too hard to prove who I was. And I knew Jeanette really respected what I was doing too, because she was the number one supporter of Fables. But that was a moment where I felt like Paul kind of realized I wasn't a kid anymore. And maybe there was something there.
Which is remarkable considering Paul was about 11 when Joe Orlando hired him for DC.
Right.
I had sort of an opposite experience over the same sort of thing.
It's funny, Mike. You sent me the image and I cannot find it. I don't know where. I looked in our texts. I couldn't find it there. It may be in an email that I lost. I wished I had it, but go ahead, because I know where this story is going.
I may be going somewhere different.
Okay.
Let's see. Let me know. We were doing a spin-off miniseries. We meaning not me. I wasn't involved in it at all. So you'd think it's none of my business. Not in my book. We're doing a Lobo miniseries. And our marketing director, Bruce Bristow, at the time, thought it would be great to come up with what is called a dump, which is a cardboard thing that you sort of fold together like origami from a Speed Freak, and you put the books in there, and then they put it next to the cash register. Yeah, good luck with that. And people would buy it. Well, this was a picture or a dump of Lobo on the toilet. Get it?
Right.
And my argument was, this is too inside, I thought, to work. And a lot of retailers objected to it, didn't use it, which is their prerogative. And it has nothing to do with DC, really, unless they were mortally offended. Okay, that happens. I wasn't really offended. I just thought people wouldn't get the joke. It's just that simple. People, at that point in time, I don't think people really knew what a dump was. Today, maybe, but probably not. It's an odd word.
It is. It's an oddly chosen word for such a thing, if you think about it, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I hadn't thought about it.
Whose idea was that? Is it an acronym for something? Probably not.
So I got shot down on that, but And it didn't bother me. And I haven't really thought, there you go. I haven't really thought about this much, once in a while. And it's been like 35 years. So,
Yeah, I thought you were going to go with the Wonder Woman story.
oh, tell me about that.
The Brolin Wonder Woman cover.
Yeah.
You told me that there was a Brolin Wonder Woman cover that was rejected, and you loved it. Oh my goodness! I'm okay. So it was too suggestive, I think, that it got rejected for, and Brian was very upset about it. Is that ringing a bell?
No,
Ah,
not at all. But
we'll have to come back in another multiverse, and we'll come back to that story.
I'm
Let
just
me say something about Brian. He and I bonded in like 1980. It was right before Titan did their first reprint of his Judge Dredd, which was a magnificently beautiful book. And I had him out for this convention for Chicago Comic-Con. And he said, well, nobody knows who I am. And I said, you may be surprised. And so he comes out, and the line was so long, and the people were crowded around his table so tightly that he didn't get out of his hotel room bed for the next 2 days.
whoa. I believe it.
So but I never met him before, so I didn't know that could be an issue. So Joe Staten and Hillary Staten and joined us for lunch the next day at a Chinese restaurant, a wonderful Chinese restaurant.
And they're lovely people, if I can just interject.
They most certainly are, Rachel.
They are some of the loveliest people in the world.
Yeah, it's true. And we were running late. We were having such a good time with that meal. And one of the reasons why was because Brian and I bonded over our mutual love of Frank Zappa. So
That explains a lot.
it does. I think it does. And I'm glad you get that. That's very nice and very fulfilling. I should point out that we ran over. They had to catch a plane at O'Hare Field in order to make their plane in New York in order to fly back to England. So it would be a real problem if they missed the plane. I commandeered Hillary's car, drove through side streets all the way to O'Hare, which is a fairly long drive from Chinatown. And back then, I was able to drive right up to the runway. I knew the routes back there because O'Hare is a nightmare. So I knew the back way, and I got him to the gate from the other side of the gate, from where the plane was. I parked I stopped next to the plane. They walked up, the stairs into the jetway and showed their credentials and got on the airplane and just made it.
Whoa.
Just made the airplane. So that was a hell of a day for, I think, all of us.
Well, I will just interject by saying, Bob, the fact that you said that Mike and I are sort of like simpatico here, not only did we have those stories of a character on the toilet, but I have the opposite Brian Bolland story about music. Now, I will admit that so many of my best relationships in comics, including the terrific man that I married, are linked to a fantastic record collection, but not Brian Bolland, which goes to show you that you don't have to agree with my taste in music to love working with me. Because Brian recently posted on Facebook that he thought I was going to throw him out of his office when he was visiting the DC offices because he doesn't like David Bowie, which wounds me just even thinking about it. And when I say it, I start to get like the heebie-jeebies. Not a Bowie fan. So
well, I like Zappa and Bowie. So there you go.
All right. Well, that's why you're bringing us together. But wow, what a great story.
The funny thing is, I prefer Bowie's work as a producer. I am in
Interesting.
awe of his work as a producer. I like his work a lot, but I am in awe of his work as a producer.
Interesting. One of the things I should tell you about iDoppelganger, because I do want to know if Howard Chaykin is Mike Gold's doppelganger. But you can answer that in a few minutes. In iDoppelganger, I have a section called Confirm Deny. And so there are about 8 people who I've worked with over the years who received an email from me that had anywhere between 4 and 10 true or half-true statements. And I've asked them to pick one, confirm or deny, or rewrite their own. And it was a lot of fun to do that. So when I say the book is 50% me, my story up and down the corporate ladder, blah, 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 and 50% how to make your comics amazing, level up, it's also a lot of pro tips and origin stories by some of your favorite people in comics. And just today, I heard back from Gerard Way, and he's going to do a confirm deny. So I'm super excited about that because Young Animal was an absolute joy to put together. And it launched without me in the summer of 2016. And that was okay because Gerard and I did all the heavy lifting more than a year before that. And I was so proud of the work and to see Gerard's name in lights for something other than being a rock star. He is a rock star writer, and he's a terrific artist as well. So what a great joy to work with him and to help him realize.
I'm excited that he wanted to contribute. So I love that.
Yeah.
That whole line was brilliant. And you published wonderful books that I look forward to reading. And that's probably my highest praise because, it's about me. But I was excited for some of those books. A lot of those books, there weren't that many, but I really enjoyed them. You guys knew what you're doing.
Well, I will tell you that I had wanted to work with Gerard for years, and he was very busy with his music, and Grant always said to me, Shelly, Gerard is a rock star, capital RS. But I said I wasn't going to listen to his music because I didn't want it to affect my judgment of his comic book writing. And my first experience with Gerard was hiring him to write the introduction to Young Liars, which is one of David Lapham's creator-owned books. So I'm going to give more secret information in iDoppelganger about this. But let me just tell you that working with Gerard on Young Animal to end my Vertigo career by orchestrating that, from the ground up, there was no way I couldn't be proud. So I think a lot of people felt really bad for me when the announcement came out. And it was at a time when social media wasn't quite as rampant, and I remember that I think Heidi McDonald from The Beat had a lot of people contribute like a farewell, which started to read like an obituary. And I thought, you know what? I'm stepping out here to me in lights. Like I had no regrets. And there's no greater feeling than that, to know that it was time and that you gave it your all and you were leaving the reins with other people, and whatever happened, well, it was on them, but I know what I did and I still stand by it. So I'm glad that you liked the line, Mike, because it was in the works for years, and putting those teams together just was so gratifying. And it exemplifies my point of view in how I put teams together, which is cast a wide net, bring two or four or six disparate people from different parts of the world, comics and otherwise, put them together on the page and see how they work together. And if they don't work well together, you got to fire and rehire and have the balls to do that fast, because the best comics happen fast. And the reason, I'm sure you'll agree, Mike, the reason we could get so many monthly books out was we didn't have time to doubt ourselves. And the best editors have strong convictions, and have no fear. And when you mess up, you fess up and move on. You don't have time to get precious, right? You can't get precious.
And move on.
Yeah.
And that can drive people crazy. But they haven't been in that spot.
Exactly.
You have to move on.
Yeah. This is why a lot of comics today don't come out for years and years and years. And they start as monthlies, and then maybe they peter out and they're one trade miniseries. And it also applies to kickstarting, because you have to deliver on your promise.
Yep.
And if you can't get your promised item, whether it's a comic or an experience or a cassette of some garage band music, if you can't get it out when you say you're going to get it out, you better have a good reason. And that's not my dog ate my homework. That's not my cat is sick and at the vet. And that is not I just have to get a day job because I had to use the money to pay for my water bill, and now I need money to feed myself. When you kickstart, the number one thing you have to remember is that you have to be accountable. And that's what you are when you're an editor. You are responsible for hiring and firing and paying. And that's the most important thing of all, is when you are in that position, you need to take care of your crew, because they're working for you and with you.
I just noticed that our friend Ed just wrote a poem.
He did. He's asked me about that line, and that's a famous Shelley-ism, I guess.
The thing is, and if you're out in the public, whatever your public is, people know you. People know your work after a while. They know a lot of stuff that isn't true as well. All you can be is yourself, doing your stuff, and as an editor, acting on that very same behalf of your talent, and sometimes of the corporation, although I try to minimize that. That's how it works. It's a creative industry. Ergo, our highest calling is to creative fulfillment.
So true.
We can go forever. I mean, we've barely scratched.
Yeah.
This is a lot of vertigo, but I don't want to minimize. I think it's really interesting, because what Mike said is true about what you did with Young Animal, and I think that Young Animal was a proving ground for you, and you honed it and you perfected it with Black Crown.
Aw. Well, thank you. I had a lot. It must be said, Black Crown is 50% Philip Bond, and the best part of Philip Bond stepping up and designing like nobody's business and drawing amazing comics. But one of the other things, Bob, that I have to say, and I'm going to have a section of it devoted to iDoppelganger. Even if you're a solo comics editor, and that's what I am, I can work best by myself in a room without anyone around. But you have to know how to delegate, especially if you're working for a big company. And you have to work well with, at the very least, an assistant editor who is your running mate. And you have to trust that person. And what I think it's worth saying, and I hope that this is going to come out in iDoppelganger, I'm appreciative of all the assistants I've had. And they were all different. And some of them couldn't stand me. And I knew it, because how do you not know that? And some of them quit, and some of them actually went on to do incredible things in their own right and kind of carve their own path. But comics are a collaborative medium. You can't do it all yourself. And I didn't learn that delegating part until early in the 2000s. I tried to do it all myself. And you can get sick that way. And you're also not celebrating the uniqueness of the medium.
Right. Very good. Yes. Oh my, yes. Yes, that's just a great truth right there. Sorry, I'm babbling, but
you're not. You're just agreeing with me. I think this is the mutual appreciation society of just editors at large, and these are things that they don't teach you in art school and they don't teach you in college. And you don't often learn in a day job where you don't have creative spirit and you don't have people around you that say, go for it.
Right.
But number one thing you have to do if you want to be an editor is you have to believe in your gut instincts, whether you're right or wrong. And I always say, when in doubt, leave it out. And that applies to too much color on a page, too many words on a page, too many tiny figures in every panel, because every page is 6 to 8 panels. And unless you're David Lapham, you got to stop doing that. Even if you're David Lapham, I'm going to ask you to throw in a splash or a spread. And I've got a secret origin David Lapham story that I'm not going to share here, Bob, because we would be talking for 2 hours. But I'll leave it like this. When people ask me what my favorite comic book is, there's no hesitation, and it's Stray Bullets #1, because when I read it, I fell to my knees, and I knew at that moment I was going to be a comics lifer. And that
There
was
you
in
go.
1995.
So that is, you are not the only one who has that opinion
About David Lapham and Stray
about
Bullets.
that book.
Yeah.
I've heard other people say exactly that.
Lapham, and I'm sure he's not listening because I'm working with him right now, and I hope he's not listening because he should be working. He is the greatest gift to American crime comics. Mic drop, full stop. Cheers.
Tell you a real quick story. I was at the airport waiting for the flight to San Diego, which is always an interesting thing in New York because chances are pretty good you're going to run into somebody else in the business because there was only one direct flight in those days.
Correct. And which year was this, if I may?
Oh,
95?
earlier. It was maybe 90. So Jim Shooter walks into the lounge, sits down, we're talking, and he's very excited, which is odd. And he says, "Yeah, I'm working with this new guy. He's really good." And he starts telling me about David. And by the time, we had to board the plane, it was like, screw this, I want to read the comic book. And it came out, and I was excited. This guy is really, really good. So I understand that emotion. You're looking at, there's nothing better in this business than to look at something that is magic. And we get to do it all the time. And they pay us to do it.
Right.
It's one of the fun things about being in this industry is how much what Mike just expressed is something that we all experience. Like when we talk to somebody about something that they have seen that we may not have. I want to read the comic. We all have that. Like, oh, well, I want to read that. I want to see that. I want to experience that magic. And that's what it is. It's kind of bringing things full circle. It's when you go to a place like the Billy Ireland Museum or see stuff like that, where you see, one of the things, and I didn't get into it, but one of the things in that museum, there's a special exhibit going on. So if you can get there before May, please do, because there's a special exhibit of Larry Ivy's collection there. And he has a whole bunch of Al Williamson sketches. And, sitting there, which Mike told me I should steal. I didn't, but
I told you after the fact.
Well, they were behind glass, but the point is that
you didn't have your blowtorch or glass cutter on.
I'm looking at them with Howard Chaykin, and he's like investigating it, and he's like, and it was on like tissue paper and just these amazing sketches. He's like, yeah, that's because he used like the back of the pen. I think he did this here. And like when you get into that kind of guerrilla attack of art and paper and putting ink on it in a way that evokes emotion, that's why we're all here. That's why we all keep doing this.
Yeah.
In 1968, Robert Crumb said in his first reprint anthology, which was a big deal in 1968, he said, It's all just lines on paper. And that's very grounding.
I have to say, not to swing it all back to iDoppelganger, but there is a section. There's a section called Prompts and Parameters, and I pretty much reveal the secrets that I use, like lines and grids, to organize myself, whether I'm editing or writing or actually trying to help a writer put together their character dramatis personae. And I show the resource, I show the actual grid, and I call it Follow My Lead, because I want to inspire other people to find their own maintenance, repetition, systems, and methods to trick the work out of themselves and others, because that's what it is sometimes. And that's what fear is all about. I think that the number one true editing crime, I always say, is not finishing something. And it's because everybody wants to be perfect. Of course we do. And as editors, we have to be pretty close. We have to be great proofreaders. We have to be, very good with grammar. And if we're not good, we have to find someone who can help us. We have to be knowledgeable about art, perspective, color theory. If you don't know those things, so what? Learn. People in the field. Take a class, read a book, but
ask a question.
But the worst thing you could do is start something and give up. And it always goes back to my dad, because from being a very little girl, and you guys met my dad at Ithacon last year, I was told that he doesn't raise quitters. So I could be 8 years old and not want to go to school, and he'd say, get up, go to school, you'll feel better by noon, because that's what his dad told him. Right. And I feel lucky that I was raised by someone like that, who respected himself enough to just step up and swing no matter what.
You promote an opportunity for me to do a shout out. When I was at DC, I worked with the best proofreader I ever worked with in any medium. And that's true to this very day. Arlene Lowe.
Yes.
Was fucking amazing.
Terrific.
And she and I would get into discussions about word usage, which were absolutely fascinating to us.
I'm sure. And Arlene is incredible, and she actually was the proofreader on both Filth and Grammar and Fast Times.
There you go.
I'm sure she would love to hear from you as well. She's terrific. I haven't been in touch with her for a while, but tremendous contributor to DC Comics legacy.
Absolutely. I don't have any way of contacting her. If you want to shoot that over to me, I would be grateful.
I will indeed. And I will say that a proofreader makes everyone on the team look good, because you aren't going to be 100% at everything in the job of being an editor, because the editor wears so many hats and so many pairs of tap shoes. And to bring it full circle to Howard Chaykin, I was really disappointed to learn that Howard is not a tap dancer. I think he can move well. He told me he can move well, but he can't tap, which was really disappointing to me as, the tap dancing kid.
Let me give you a secret about Howard. You may know, but Howard's colorblind. And all that magnificent stuff that he's done, he does intellectually.
Aha.
Not, color theory.
Right.
Which I've studied because I'm an idiot, but and I like long words, but it's brilliant. His color work is astonishing. I know that. He doesn't.
I think we need to kind of wrap up, and
we've gone way over.
We've gone way over.
Do we have any questions though? Can we at least?
There are a couple of questions, so let's get to them. They are from one of your biggest fans.
That's either going to be Shari Michelle Harrison.
Well, she said she wants to talk about your comic with your friend with your friend Shari, which would be this comic, because we can't forget that we haven't mentioned that you do have another comic series that you're working on besides what you're doing here with your summer camp story. And
Really? I don't remember that one. Can you tell me a little bit about that one? I kind of
I don't.
this is,
What is that? Oh,
this is
yeah, there she is.
this is a Hanukkah present for Shari
Oh
Harris.
boy.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice.
Really quick story. Art by Liz Prince. Last year, I realized my parents are not getting any younger. They were having more aches and pains than laughs. So I decided to put my summer camp stories into comics. And I started with Suddenly One Summer Camp from Hell. And this was the early years, 71 to 74. And then I couldn't stop because Liz Prince said she wanted to continue. So in the spring, I'll have the trade paperback, which goes all the way to 1983. So it's my years not only being a camper. And Mike, would you believe that my parents let me go to overnight camp when I was 8 years old?
Yes.
Is that crazy? They were like
not too much to my generation because parents are trying to get rid of us.
Yes.
But for your generation, yeah, I think so.
It was kind of weird, but I was into it for a time. Then I was
my cousin went to sleepaway camp at 8. Same thing.
Well, I was the littlest camper and I was shocked that they let me leave home, but I learned a lot. I'm excited about that book because Liz Prince is phenomenal and she taught me a hell of a lot about art directing, and she made the book 50,000 times better than I started it.
But the summer camp you went to, it didn't involve your being forced into coal mine, right?
Oh God, no.
Good.
But I discovered David Bowie in 1974. So that's a story.
There you go.
But there was all the typical stuff for a kid who liked to tap dance, who was allergic to nature. And I was a mess magnet. The daughter of a dry cleaner, a mess magnet, surprise.
Yep.
But yes, Shari is a wonderful friend. And I named a character in the book Shari because I wanted my best friend, who sadly died way too young, to be remembered also in comics. So I wanted her legacy to live on. And I'm thrilled that we're going to have the book that's not just black and white, Mike. There's a progression of color as we go through the 70s and 80s, because let's face it, 1983, it's going to be some pop color in there. Compliments of Duran Duran, and I'm not saying any more.
Okay.
Not saying another word, Bob, and I know you want to know the Simon Le Bon story, but you're going to have to wait till the spring.
Okay. We'll have you on in the spring and we'll talk about it.
And can Shari join us for that?
Yes, we will. Absolutely. She will join us for that one for sure.
Great.
She also has another question, and this is something that I kind of wanted to, I mean, we can't really have a conversation with Shelly and not talk about it.
Sure.
Fables, there's 150 issues, well, and more, including
we'll call
the original. Then there's Jack, and there's Cinderella, and there's all the other ones.
Right.
Did you? And I know we've
the answer to this question.
We've talked about it, but for the listeners who are hearing you on this show for the first time, when you got the pitch and I know you struggled to get it approved.
Yes.
Did you know at the point that it would be what it is?
Yes. Absolutely. No doubt. Because when I read one issue of The Elementals and I hated superheroes, I knew that Bill Willingham was a genius. And I knew after putting Bill and Mark Buckingham together on Merv Pumpkinhead that they were going to click like nobody's business. So the answer to that question is yes. And I knew when Bill pitched me Fables on the phone that I wanted to edit it, and then I had to edit it. And I did not think it was going to be a mini series. I knew it was going to be a monthly that could live on and become a TV series and a film, which it didn't become for Fables, but became for many other properties in its wake. So the answer is yes, yes, and yes. Any other questions about Fables?
We're all better off for that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Fables. We had Terry Moore on a little bit few weeks ago. So we talked about Fables then, and he said that Fables is the best work for hire, is his most favorite work for hire experience.
Wow.
That's
an honor to hear him say that.
Yes, I'm sure it is. But the question was, what is your favorite work for hire experience? Because he spent his whole career working for himself.
Yeah.
You know, that was his work on Fables was something that because he had said that he had told Bill that he didn't want to draw like castles and stuff, and it was all castles.
Well, we kind of knew he wasn't going to want to draw things like that, but we didn't care.
Right.
Terry is so talented, and I got to give props to Robin too. And working with them was incredible. His wife, Robin, who managed
absolutely
and just is not unlike my partner in crime, Philip Bond. When you're married to someone who gets you and wants to be a part of the art edit life, there's no stopping you, and there's nothing like it. But Terry just blew me away. I was a fan of Strangers in Paradise, and so many of the people we brought on to Fables were suggestions from me or suggestions from Bucky, and Bill was actually pretty good about it. And if dare I say this, but we even brought David Lapham in for a couple of issues. Fables was great because if we were running a little bit behind on a major story arc, and you will if you're doing 10, 11, 12 years of a series, it's the perfect moment to dig the new breed and bring in some people who you would never expect to partake in, fables and fairy tales. So we had a blast. I have absolutely no regrets about anything on that series. And I have a lot of really fun anecdotes and stories in iDoppelganger. And Bucky is along for the ride with me on some of those. So I'm excited about that. Mike, you have a question?
Yes, I do. When does your Kickstarter end?
Very soon, the 15th. Yeah.
The 15th. Okay.
Right. So we've got a couple more days. And while I'm here, I want to thank everyone who's backed or shared the campaign. This time of year is tough. Everybody's penny pinching. We've got the holidays like right around the corner. So I know it's hard. And I don't blame you if you cannot contribute for a physical copy. But I hope you will, because not only do all physical copy backers get the actual book, but we've squashed 3 stretch goals.
Listen, you have, and they are fantastic. You just posted, you just got through the 3rd one. And I just want to put this out there. Listen, we got 3 days to get to the 4th stretch goal. And I hope we do it, which is a Vertigo team reunion hour recorded and posted in January. And I just want to say, if you're looking for a host, I know somebody. I'm just saying.
All right, you mean Mike? Mike's available?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what he was.
Mike's a great guy. I will consider that.
Absolutely.
Listen, it would be tons of fun. I hope we get to that. We're not too far away. Might be able to do it.
We need to get there. We're going to get there.
So thank you again to everyone who's backed or shared the campaign. Sharing is just as important, because who knows how these algorithms work anymore. Tell your grumpy relatives if they want to laugh and they want to find out more about the comic book industry and behind the scenes. iDoppelganger is that and much, much more.
Absolutely. You sure you don't want to go into marketing?
She's already there.
Oh my God, I'm so not. I'm not your salesperson. I'm not your public speaker. All I want to do is sit at my desk and make comics. And
I understand that, but for not a public speaker, you are.
Well, thank you. I'm channeling my dad and my inner Chaykin.
Well,
we have to talk about the doppelganger real quickly.
Yes.
Thoughts on the doppelganger? before we go?
See, here's the thing. They're not, and I understand. So just if anybody came in late, Shelly's asked me if Mike and Howard Chaykin are doppelgangers of each other. Now, I see where the question comes from.
Even though it's impossible.
It is impossible. They are two. They're not. They're too alike and different at the same time to be doppelgangers. But they are just two incredible people who have the fact that the two of them came together at the time that they came together and created First Comics and American Flag and the things that came out of those conversations that pushed Mike forward and then brought Howard to where he was. Like, the world is better because of that.
That is truth.
Let me give a shout out to the person who made that possible. I met Howard on Thanksgiving in 1976 at a Thanksgiving dinner held at Jeanette Kahn's apartment.
Wow.
Central Park West. And I think Steve Lealoha was there and Bernie Wrightson. And it was one of those, how did I get this room moments.
This is like better than Truman Capote's Black and White Ball.
Friday nights at Jeanette's were the place to be.
Well, yeah, we got plenty of those stories. Listen, we're way over.
Yep, we are. Thank you so much,
Shelly. I want you back here. I want to see you. I want you to give Philip my best.
Well, I certainly will. Thank you both for asking me on, and I'm really excited to talk to you more about the concept of the doppelganger, as well as so many other comics things. So I would love to come back. And thank you again for all your support for my projects and for Offregister Press, and just for being great friends in comics.
Absolutely.
Shelly, you're worth every minute of it, and your career speaks for itself.
Why, thank you. I might have to actually make one of these for you as well, Mike. If you have a place in your bookshelf for a Shelly from Summer Camp doll, Liz Prince art, front and back, because I love comics. Because comics, right?
That's great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Shelly.
Thank you,
Bob.
both.
I'll let you jump off because I know you're busy, and I gotta jump in the car and drive.
Yep. All right. Well, our best to everybody, and we will be back on Tuesday with a new show. And I'm going to let you go, Mike.
Wait a moment. You didn't plug our guest.
Right. Our guest. We're going to be back on Tuesday with Joe Caramanga, who is got a new book coming out. He's had a great career at Marvel, and it continues to go on. And we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. Everybody, be here Tuesday night, 8:00 Eastern, or whatever other time that translates to upon your place on the planet. And we will see you then.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it more than I can express. Thanks, folks.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?